Welcome to the New Warehouse Podcast, the podcast for those that are curious about what's possible inside their four walls. Before we get into this episode, let's hear a word from our sponsors that make this all possible. If you're thinking about voice picking, think EPG, the team behind Lydia Voice, the industry's #1 voice picking solution. Warehouses rely on diverse teams, but language barriers can slow everything down. Lydia Live Translation empowers warehouse staff to communicate naturally in over 40 languages in real time. No template training, no dialect detection headaches. See Lydia Live Translation in action at Modex this April in booth B11122. That's booth B11122, or visit epg.com to learn more. Are you drowning in pre-sales engineering? Struggling with resource allocation? Losing opportunities because it takes too long to respond? Quoting shouldn't take weeks. Every delay slows momentum and puts revenue at risk. Today's automation buyers expect instant answers, clear options, and numbers they trust. iAutomate helps system integrators and solution providers create a customer-centric digital buying journey and deliver data-driven concepts and budgets, instantly accelerating pipeline velocity, increasing win rates, and turning speed into revenue. That's sales automation. Learn more at iAutomate.app. That's iAutomate.app. Running a 3PL with LPG or diesel forklifts? Fuel volatility, emissions, noise, and downtime add up fast. Big Joe Forklifts offers a smarter path with lithium-ion trucks featuring integrated batteries and onboard charging. No fuel handling, no tank swaps, fewer interruptions. Their Pulse telematics platform gives leaders real-time diagnostics, energy insights, and downtime prevention. You can see it all at Modex in booth 9313. That's booth 9313. And a special bonus, if you say Kevin Lawton sent me, you'll get an exclusive swag package. Check them out, booth 9313. That's Big Joe Forklifts. There's no guessing when it comes to operations. We need the truth. Sergere provides that truth when it comes to your most critical systems and operations. Trusted to bring the truth with 99.9% data accuracy to some of the world's largest companies like Honda, Toyota, DHL, Whirlpool, Cat, Eli Lilly, and more. When you need truth in your warehouse operations, bring in Sergere. Get the truth at sergere.com. That's SURGERE.com. Is your fulfillment operation ready for the next surge in demand? Don't wait until productivity stalls to think about automation. Get proactive and talk to Ocado Intelligent Automation to find out when to start your automation journey, how smart software orchestration accelerates performance, and how AMRs like Chuck scale across sites and seasons. Learn how flexible deployment, ongoing support, and real scalability help you meet your customer expectations before peak hits. Head to OcadoIntelligentAutomation.com to start your warehouse automation journey and find them in booth B10119. That's B10119 at Modex. Thank you to our sponsors, and now let's get to the podcast.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, we are going to talk about automation, and we're specifically going to talk about warehouse automation and the buying journey for warehouse automation. And we have a great panel representing multiple different parts of that journey. We have Christoph Buchmann, who is the CEO at iAutomate, which he's going to tell us a little bit about. And we have Mert Selchuk, who is the Director of Supply Chain Strategy and Solution Designs at Staples Canada. So he's in the buyer seat, so he's going to give us that perspective. And we have Rainer Buchmann, who is the former CEO of Dematic and SSI Schaefer. He's also a board member and now represents as the CEO of Dynamics Plus. So he's seen a lot of integration automation throughout his career as well. And we're going to bring all of their experiences to the table today to talk about this automation journey, where it stands right now, how it's been developing, and how people are navigating it, and potentially some tools to be able to make that buying journey better. So let's kick it off here. Let's hear from Christoph first. So Christoph has been on the podcast previously representing iAutomate. So Christoph, it's great to get you back. Give us just kind of a brief overview of your company and your role.
Hey, Kevin. Yes, good to be back. iAutomate, essentially, we're a software service provider for sales automation and digital enablement. Practically, we have a white label software for warehouse automation configuration, so a configurator, essentially, that we offer to the market as a white label software product. We're very passionate about helping the warehouse automation industry accelerate at large. There's a huge demand for it for various reasons, and we want to play our role in connecting those who need automation and those who offer it. So we kind of see ourselves as facilitators in that sense.
All right, fantastic, and great to get you back on. And Mert, why don't you tell us a little bit about your role with Staples Canada?
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Kevin. As you mentioned, my name is Mert Selchuk. I'm the Director of Supply Chain Strategy, Solutions Design, and Engineering. My team specifically in the organization looks after end-to-end facility design, network design, anything that has to do with layout, slotting, labor, automation of any kind, as well as continuous improvement projects via either software or hardware. It's an exciting time to be at Staples. It's definitely no longer the back-to-school company you know of, but there's a big push for tech. There's a big push for fast-moving consumer goods. So it's a very fun time to be here, especially on the supply chain side, because the profile you design against is super interesting. So I'm excited to share a little bit of that today. And once again, thanks for having me.
All right, fantastic. And looking forward to diving into that from your perspective as well. And Rainer, tell us a little bit about you and your extensive history in the industry.
Extensive, long time. I'm now 40 years, actually 41, in the logistics automation industry. I've been, I'm an engineer by trade, so I've been understanding a lot about what's happening in there and whatnot. I've been on the board of the, I would say, two main market players, Dematic and SSI Schaefer, for many years, over decades. And I've brought a lot of automatic systems in the logistics field into operation in Europe, in North America, and Middle East, and even Australia. And I must say, some run better, some run worse. Most of them actually finally run quite well. And I think I bring a perspective to the discussion from the supplier side of how this business has been and will evolve from here.
Yes, absolutely. And very interested to dig into that too, the kind of evolution of how this business has evolved over time and what you're seeing currently. So, but let's kick things off here. Let's talk a little bit about, warehouse automation and just ultimately, where does the buying journey begin? So Christoph, I'm going to go to you first here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, from your perspective and what you see in the market, where does that buying journey actually start?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I love that question, especially because perspective, I really think matters. And I've had the privilege to capture many perspectives myself. I started working on the solution provider side in engineering and sales. So I was really on the side offering those solutions. The more you do it, the more you learn really to listen to your customers. So, you get that perspective as well. And with iAutomate, we're we're in a neutral position, right? We're kind of in between with the facilitator. So I really get to appreciate the various steps along the journey where the different people are and their perspectives overall. So get a lot of all-round feedback here. But I think to answer that question, where does it really begin? Where it doesn't begin is when a customer calls a solution provider and says, hey, I want to talk about automation. Why? It's already started. It started long before that. That's just the first point of contact where this future project starts to materialize a little bit. But it's actually started at the point of identifying a problem, an operational problem on the customer end. So long before somebody like Mert or somebody who's running a warehouse operation will even talk to a solution provider, be that automation or software or any other solution to improve the process, they've identified a problem and they're probably already a step ahead. They have multiple solution scenarios that they're evaluating, and they probably have started the internal buying process. They have the support to advance with this idea because ultimately it's a transformation process. So where does the buying journey begin? I would actually say it really starts with having identified a problem statement and understanding that warehouse automation is potentially a viable solution. Now you're still at the very beginning of that journey because that needs to be vetted, validated, torn apart, put back together. And that's really then the joy of working with a customer through months, sometimes years of this project materializing. But I think it's important to understand that it all starts with the problem statement, right? At the end of the day, if you automate a bad process, you've still got a bad process, just a very expensive one. So it's important to understand, I think, where the customer stands, where they're coming from, why they think automation is a solution, and more importantly, I think the responsibility of any, let's say the salesperson, because that's usually the first point of contact for the solution provider, their responsibility is not to go ahead, head through the wall and say, oh, we've got this and we've got that solution and let's talk about it. It should be validating the problem statement. Is automation actually the solution? Often it's not. Often there are other solutions that haven't been discovered or thought about or considered in the same magnitude. And there are examples where people automated and it wasn't necessary and also didn't yield the results, caused more problems even in hindsight or took a while to fix. So I really think understanding where the buyer stands in their journey, exactly where that journey begins for them, then the various touch points with the solution providers and validating that problem statement and then working towards a solution statement or multiple solution offerings. That's really the important part, I think. So yeah, in short, once the customer is talking to a solution provider, the journey has already started. It probably starts within the four walls of the warehouse, and a team of operators understand that things need to change.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I feel like, to me, I mean, it sounds like the problem or the journey probably starts when somebody gets frustrated with the process, right? And like, this could be better. So I'm curious, Mert, from your perspective. I mean, you're a buyer, right? So where does your journey begin? Where do you feel like you kind of start thinking about these things?
I'll actually answer from two perspectives. In my little short career over here, I also had the opportunity to be on the 3PL side. So the answer to that question is super straightforward. When did the 3PLs buy? Unless they had a robust product roadmap, so on and so forth, it's when the customer came and said, I need a reduction on my unit rates, or I need a reduction on my fixed variable structure, or my cost plus, and then everything would stop. And then they would say, hey, automation companies, help us lower this 60 cents down, 50 cents, so on and so forth. Now, when I transition to the customer side, it's everything Christoph said. Now, let me show you what's under the hood. Before I even reach out to a automation company, just as Christoph mentioned, we identify a problem, a gap, or an opportunity, right? Repeatable behaviors, automatable behaviors, automatable processes. We try to identify those. From there, lots of data, right? We're talking about a couple months out before we even reach out to a vendor. We look at the data. Does the profile justify automation? There's no point in buying a batch to sort automation if your batch collectors are not great, right? You cannot buy a AMR-based travel improvement solution unless the travel distances unless they're very long or unless they're optimized. So after the data, we also tap our WMS teams on the shoulder. We say, hey, we're trying to change this process. Can you do some mods? Can you do some configuration changes? We try to exhaust basically every opportunity before we get to say, yes, we need automation and here's how it fits. Now, good engineering teams do that, right?
Mhm.
And some organizations, they just look at the problem, they call the automation guy and say, fill the void. But our journey is a lot more data-driven, exhaustion-driven. And by the time we get in front of an automation vendor, we get to say, we are looking for a system, or we're looking for a top-loaded SRS. So we bring the data to that point, and we come with an ask rather than tell me what's right for me. So that's our journey.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think, love to hear the data, right? I think that's a great thing to gather, right? And actually kind of get that foundation of truth in a sense, right? From a data perspective. And I love what you said about the 3PL side, right? It's like, well, the customer kind of was like, we need to cut the rates a little bit, and how are we going to save money, right? To figure that out. So Rainer, on your side, I'm curious, like, from the start of the buying journey, right? I mean, Christoph kind of shared, from the solution provider perspective, and Mert obviously from the buyer perspective. But, as you mentioned, 40 years of experience in this space. I'm curious, like, have you seen where that beginning point of the buying journey has changed or evolved over time? Do you feel like I would feel like the buyer almost has more knowledge or more information now than probably ever before, right?
That is absolutely right. It depends on the region, though, whether he's educated or not. But I'll try to look back a little. When I started my career in the 80s and 90s, you usually had a lot of customers who had their problem defined via a consultant. So there was an RFQ you could quote against. Me as a supplier, I could quote against. That was well thought through in most cases, but in general, quite good quality. All this data crunching had been done before, and the whole concept made sense. And now I come to a good perspective from the supplier side. And the project had a high probability of really becoming, being awarded somewhere. Hopefully to me, but always there's competition. The worst you have as a supplier is to waste your energy on projects that are finally shelved or that don't go anywhere. Yeah, so this is exactly what makes it difficult for the supplier side to find a solution, or whether shall I quote a budget, shall I quote a very rough order of magnitude, shall I do some detailed work? Pretty difficult to find out. That's been the history, and in the, I would say, 2000s, especially with the internet evolving and people being able to inform themselves more about what's available on the market, we received a lot of requests of customers, most often the young ones, right from the university, saying, "Oh, I need a conveyor for this or that. I need an ASRS. I want a shuttle system." And then you had to dive into and see what he really needs. And in most cases, he wanted to have a feeling of what Mert just said. Would there be a reduction in my operating costs or not? Yeah. So, but of course, in the beginning, there's a customer he wants to buy. Let's work out a project. Let's work out a proposal for him. And that's where the energy went down quite a lot. So that's the change in behavior. Today, we have a lot of much more educated customers, especially in Europe and North America. They inform themselves mainly through the internet, through YouTube videos, and through maybe podcasts like this one or so, which is good. On the other hand, that has slightly changed the approach of the suppliers, because if you have a good niche product, you promote that product. You don't even know about the problem, but you promote it and push it. And therefore, I had several conversations in the last, I would say, 10 years, where people had a fixed opinion already on what they wanted, and only through some more deeper discussions and data crunching, they got convinced, oh no, that maybe is not the right solution for what I need. And there are plenty of solutions, technologies on the market now, and I must fairly say all of them have their right to be there. Some have a sweet spot, very small sweet spot, and others have a wider sweet spot. And of course, it's overlapping in many cases. So there's not only one solution to your problem, there could be 3 or 4. And that is an interesting one then for the customer, for the one who wants to buy something, to work out.
Yeah.
So that is the change I've seen evolving. More educated customers now, but you still have to talk to them and guide them to the right solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point you have in there about, there's more just accessibility in general, like to the information on the market. And to your point, right, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I see this cool robot or piece of automation, like, oh, I want that, right? I need that, right? I'm going to go to Modex, right? And be like, oh yes, like shiny objects, like I want that in my warehouse, right? So there's a lot of curiosity, I think that exists there. And I'm curious, Mert, from your perspective on the buyer side, I mean, how do you kind of navigate, or your team navigate, like going from like curiosity of like, oh wow, that's possible, or that's cool, this is something new that is being announced at Modex or Logimat, right? How do you go from just like curiosity to actual like seriously shopping?
Yeah, no, thanks, Kevin. And that shiny object syndrome that you just mentioned is one to get out of. Lately, we've been hearing a lot of, oh, look at Climb for a lot of technologies. But when does the journey change? I think it's what Christoph said, right? As soon as the opportunity plus automate return on something, an improvement opportunity on something, whether this is the cycle times, whether this is the SLAs, whether this is the uptick on the productivity, and you can justify that and you can prove that. And against that improvement, you can say, it's going to cost me this much. That's where it's been a little slow, right? You reach out to an automation vendor, you wait a couple of weeks, you answer some of the questions. Again, you already know an answer to, right? You have the data points, you bring the automation vendor up to speed on the data points. They say, okay, let me take this back to my engineer. My engineer takes another 2 weeks to look at it. Then the engineer comes back with incorrect numbers. And you're like, nope, that's not what I was trying to do here. Then another 2 weeks for them to go back and fix it. And you're just waiting for four weeks, right? You're just waiting for a couple of weeks there just to get a number for you to plug the model that's already there, ready to go to spit out either a simple payback, a ROIC, an IRR, whatever you're looking for. Now, on the other side, tools like Christoph, if I already have my data points, if I already have my information from my own engineering team, I can go into a tool, plug in that information, and get a 80, 85% accurate. That's already half the battle. Then that gives me the ability as the buyer to go back to my leadership and say, hey guys, it's going to directionally cost this much. The return is this much. The simple payback is this much. Are we even interested, or do we even have the capital budget to move on with a project like this, right? At that point, it's either a go or a no-go, but at least I just didn't spend 3 to 4 weeks waiting. And to Rainer's point, the automation vendors also on the hook during that time too, right? They want to convert the sales lead into an opportunity in time. And unfortunately, after their engineer comes back with a number, and that's a lead loss, that time lost.
I think, it's a great point, right? Is okay. Well, we see something, right? And to, Rainer's earlier point too as well, like there's a lot more marketing availability kind of around that, and to his point, right, okay, it's a good solution, we want to talk about it, we want to get it out there, right, but then that also becomes a little I think confusing in some aspects, right, for the buyer, because it's like, oh yes, this looks cool, and as you joked there, Mert, like, oh yes, this thing climbs, right? So looking at those things, and then how do we actually come to like, well, what is our reality in that sense, right? And I think Christoph, that's kind of, as Mert was alluding to, your tool kind of comes into play here. So tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, like, what do you see along those lines where, that curiosity starts to shift into like, okay, this is actually something viable that we can pursue or move forward to, and how do you help to kind of close that gap?
I love what Rainer was saying there. I was listening carefully because we, in 2026, have multiple generations in intralogistics that are basically pre and post the digital era. So hearing that before the 2000s and internet, RFQs were carefully prepared, I can fully appreciate that, right? You just didn't have the luxury to fire off RFQs if they weren't properly. The solution providers wouldn't have responded to them either if they didn't have a minimum quality. then you fast forward, and there's fantastic marketing out there. Everyone's got great videos. You go to the trade shows, there's a solution overload now when it comes to warehouse automation. I think being able to navigate that is the tricky part. And I would sum that whole thing up. How has this behavior changed? Quite simply, the first question when a potential new buyer is, what does it cost? What does automation cost? That's like asking an architect, what does a house cost? Well, I need a bit more data to answer that. But it turns out, while the answer is correctly, it depends, that not always be the answer, because initially I think it's important understanding at what stage is the buyer. They're not looking for a firm proposal. They're not looking for a contract at this point. They need to bring it down from 50,000 feet to 5,000 feet to qualify the business case, just support the initial initiative, support the internal buying process, people behind them. On that side, I've learned a lot over the years in really going along with the buyers through the whole journey. It's not just getting the funding approved. That comes further down the line. You need to rally the troops behind you. You have a transition and change management ahead of you. It's a fundamental change how product enters and exits. You need to do the technical analysis. Is this warehouse big enough? Is the building there? The fire code? Those things. There's so much that goes into the internal process that if the industry would enable the buyers with digital tools to do some of this pre-qualification work upfront, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and it's not engineering per se, but it's good enough to qualify the opportunity, then a lot of that homework is done, and we're kind of back to that quality that Rainer was talking about. When you did get an RFQ, it was well prepared. So I think it serves both sides, and I think that's where digital enablement really plays a big role. And that's precisely what we're trying to do at iAutomate. We're trying to get people from 0%, they've identified automation as a viable option, maybe, and they need some data, they need some information, but they don't want to engage and talk to 5 different vendors and spend, to Mert's point, 4 weeks sitting on their thumbs waiting for information. That information needs to come quickly, be transparent. Essentially what B2C buyers already experience, the B2B buyers want to catch up to that experience. So I think digital enablement is the key word, and that's what we're trying to do, is just get that customer from 1 to 15, 20%, because both sides really benefit. The customer can now more accurately or reliably or with more confidence say automation is not for us, right? If it's $100 million, they're not going to go to their line manager and say, hey, I think we should buy automation. If it's $4 million and they've got a reasonable ROI they can justify, I think they're much more comfortable having that internally. And on the other side of the fence, the solution providers in a perfect world only want leads in the pipeline that are qualified, that are of quality. That's not always the case. It's often quantity over quality, which I think is a flawed approach. But nonetheless, improving the quality on the vendor side is also extremely important. You can measure that in time saved. I mean, that's money at the end of the day. So that bringing them both together through digital self-serve tools, I think that's the way forward. And we see that in many other industries, right? It's actually warehouse automation, logistics is kind of behind the trend on that compared to various different industries. And that's where we see where we can add value. And that's our mission, what we're set out to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you encapsulated it perfectly there, where you said, we have the B2C kind of digital enablement, and that's a very easy process, right, to do a purchase, and B2B is kind of hungry for that same type of experience, right? And I think that's certainly driven by, well, many of the reasons we have automation, because of e-commerce and what people expect, right? As consumers, right, they've just become accustomed to the ease of buying their everyday goods, right? So why can't I do the same for my business, right? And why can't I have that ease, right? Why does it take so long to just get a price in the first place, right? And do those types of things. So I love what you're focused on in doing that there. So I'm curious, Rainer, from your perspective, right, when we look at, kind of the advancements and the curiosity and, the overall general awareness and overload of solutions in the marketplace, I'm imagining that you've certainly over the years experienced where customers are kind of missing things in their information gathering and not necessarily asking the right questions or coming to the right conclusions on their own. So I'm curious if you could give us some guidance on, what are the right things that you should come to a solution provider with, and what are the questions that should be asked there too?
Very, very good point. So discovery and its talk is the most important thing. The customer needs to know what he wants to achieve there. And that is usually translated into money, sometimes into quality or a combination of both. Speed is also of importance, but money it eventually comes down to. And also the quality of speed are somehow converted to money. So in the end, it is usually labor saving that we are up to with the automation to try to replace repetitive tasks, low value tasks that can be done by a machine much better. And of course, this also goes into quality and, as I said, speed. One example, the distribution centers or the cross-dock centers of DHL, UPS, and whatever they are called, you couldn't do that manually at all. Yeah, they are firing their 3-4 parcels a second into the chutes. So that's impossible to do manually. There's a limit to what can be done, and therefore the automation can't be avoided. On the other hand, these customers know exactly what they want. The general customer, there are still many, many, many warehouses with manual shelves, and somebody goes shopping like in a supermarket to collect the orders he's just received, whether internet orders or retail replenishment, whatever it may be. So there are so many of such warehouses, and of course that is very inefficient. And these guys, they hear about, oh, there's automation around, and then they ask me for a price for that. This comes back to what Christoph says. Yeah, I want to build a house, and how much is it? I can't tell you. I need to know a little bit more. How many orders a day? What is the order lines per order, the pieces per order line? How effective are your pickers in today's operation? Can you batch it or not? So you see there are so many details already that you need to know to be able to give a good answer. So therefore, in this case, me as a supplier, I would love people to come to me who have already found out that this technology is not good for me. Let's say a shuttle high dynamic I don't need. Could it be an auto store? Yes, that would fit. Could it be a mini load operation? Yes, possibly as well. Then I know the direction to go to. Yeah, then he has already thought his process and where he can replace manual labor via automation. So then I'm also able to do with minimum effort, which is good for me because this costs money, to give him a rough budget. If he says, oh yeah, that fits. Good story here. I've quite often come across people who've been to a show, a trade show, and came back, oh, I want automation. I've seen this and that at your booth. I said, yeah, that's great. How much is it? I said, yeah, okay, give me how many storage positions, what's your throughput? And then they gave me the numbers, and I said, between 2 and 3 million. What? That much? I will tell you the way I go. So that happens often. And therefore, I very much appreciate this way, and I feel it already that people, potential customers, come much more educated with their requests. Still, they need to be guided from there. It's not a price comparison from that point onwards because there are still many, many differences. And as I said before, I think that is really important. As a supplier, you of course have one thing to sell, and you want to sell that. So if there is a customer who is already close to buying, then you of course try to promote your own thing. If it's completely outside your sweet spot, you won't go further because he'll find out anyway, and it's not worth the effort. But if it's close and if something else is also good, well, yeah, then the sales task begins. Then I try to convince that guy that my thing is better than the other. And if he doesn't know about the other one yet, I won't even tell him.
Good tip there. Yeah. So very interesting. And I think, obviously, as we talked about, a couple of times here, I think that just that overall discovery is so wide open now to finding new solutions. And, that's a great point there you had there, Rainer, about, you go to the trade show, I see it and, I want automation, right? And then like it's sticker shock, right? On like, this is how much it actually costs, right? So how do you get that information together in the right way? So I'm curious, Mert, from your perspective, what have you kind of learned over the years? Maybe what are some of your learnings as someone that has, bought these systems and implemented these systems? I mean, are there questions that you've learned to ask to get to the right solution over time?
Look, if I could dilute everything I learned in my short career into a couple of key things, the creativity of your integrator, your OEM matters, right? You go to them with a problem. If they're willing to collaborate with you, if they know your budget target, if they know your data, then the conversation becomes a collaboration. And it's not just one vendor asking another vendor for a quote, and it's not a hackle, right? It's not a, I want a $2 million system. Oh, our system is $3 million. Okay, let's not do business. That's not the right way. The right way should be, here's my problem. Is there a tool in your arsenal to solve it? No. Okay. Is there a tool in your arsenal to solve it? Yes. Can we customize it to make it look like this? I'll give you an example. One of our portfolio is quite unique because we do both B2C and B2B, as you can appreciate, to school boards, banks, etc. So larger orders, full pallet pulls, full case grabs, master carton grabs, and some of the SKU portfolio of those B2B customers is quite predictable, right? School boards will always order reams of paper. Hospital will always order extra thick toilet papers and toilet rolls. These are big, bulky items. We store anywhere from 30 to 45 days on hand for these items. You can appreciate the pallets are quite large, tall. And what we went to one of our automation vendors with a problem was we would like to squeeze the tightest pallet per square foot for these items. Today, we're storing them in double deeps, right? 6 levels tall, 10-foot aisles, almost 11-foot aisles. Is there an opportunity for us to squeeze this into a much denser orientation? A couple of automation vendors said, let's get you a 4-way shuttle, right? Immediately. Let's get you a 4-way shuttle. That's the right solution.
Yeah.
And I said, hold on there. I also want to be able to case pick from these things, and I don't want to waste time with a pull letdown. I also don't want to, pull them from a reserve location, shunt them across the facility, put them to a pick face, pick from there, and then when it's time to replenish, I want to run that cycle again. One of the vendors said, you know what? Your SKU count is so low, and most of your pulls are on the master case level. Why don't we look into a radio shuttle system, a dumb shuttle system, not a 4-way pallet, nothing fancy. It's a radio shuttle. And then I said, I love it. Radio shuttle looks beautiful, but what can you offer to me if I wanted to pick as a part of the radio shuttle system too? Then the integrator said, you know what, I have another solution. How would you like a radio shuttle? Right underneath it, there's a tunnel pick area where you can let down the pallet with an AGV, feed it into a flow lane, and the associates within the tunnel can either pick it onto a conveyor or pick it via just good old school center rider. That's what we're chasing. Integrators, OEMs who understand the problem you're trying to solve and who's willing to be creative with you and almost feel like they're an extension of your organization. It's just a much better relationship to have. And utilizing tools like Christoph's at the very beginning to qualify, yes, I have capital for this. Now I'm ready to dive into the detailed discussion much quicker. That's what we like to do.
Yeah.
I may add something to that, Mert. That's from the supplier side exactly the same. I love it to have deep conversation with the customer. In that process, you also build trust long before the purchasing order comes in. Yeah, and these are the projects actually where the customer and the supplier are deeply involved in fine-tuning the solution. These are the successful ones in the end. Yeah, I've also seen other projects where there was a pretty well worked out RFQ. They are still around, the big ones, for instance. And then I always say the customer, because a consultant worked out those concepts, the customer receives a big Christmas present when it's ready, that he doesn't even know what exactly was inside. And then the problem's solved. And I've been there as well. So I fully confirm what you're saying, Mert. The deeper and closer you work in the beginning, it's like a marriage. It's a project, not just a procurement thing. And the deeper you work, the better the thing goes in the end. It will never be good the moment you want to hand over. There are still improvements to be made, and many of such you will only find out after you've operated it for a few months. That is exactly where the quality of the relation in the end comes in.
Rainer, Christoph, I don't know if you guys would agree, but I don't like it when I come out of an RFP or an RFQ and there's 8 pages of assumptions documented by the vendor. If your box sizes don't exceed this, my solution will work. If your item master accuracy is this percent, it will work. If your throughput requirements don't exceed this, it will work. Guys, I thought I was buying a system that could fix my solutions and not complexity. Versus, Rainer, when we do what you just said, right, the marriage, that assumptions page is a couple pages, and you're just kind of validating a few data points.
Let me give you the other perspective to that. Why some people and even me have been doing that sometimes, especially in the automotive industry. I must admit, this is important for the vendor, right? Because if you don't do it like that, the other side eventually finds a very clever lawyer who puts a lot of pain into the day.
True.
Yeah, it's very.
I would agree with that, but I think you're right on, and I think this sums up I love how you said conversation turning into collaboration. What you just explained, you can appreciate the level of detail and data and collaboration and time that goes into this, and that, in my opinion, is only justified once the previous initial steps have been qualified quickly and passed, right? The worst thing is you end up in these detailed workshops and conversations with a customer that you haven't even talked about the first price tag, the sticker shock, right? So before both sides invest that time and energy, you need to have passed a few quality gates. And I think that's movement. And then I love that part. Those conversations are usually a sign for this project will materialize. It's just a matter of who's going to win it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic, and I love. I think Rainer made the point kind of earlier that for the solution provider themselves, like they want it to be successful, right? So it's even though maybe they might not get the sale, right? Like not getting in a situation where they recommend the wrong thing because they're focused on the sale instead, like. That carries weight through the industry, right? That like, you put in a solution, it doesn't work the way it's supposed to do. Like, people are going to talk about that, right? It's going to come up in conversation. I'm sure, Mert, you've had conversations with your peers on things like that, right? That happen. So it's super important to be able to create that great relationship that Mert kind of described in there, the marriage in a sense, right? And making sure that like, we're not just focused on like, all right, I got to sell this product line and just get it out there, right? Versus, okay, like let's really look at this and give you like the right setup, right? Whether it's like my highest ticket thing or my lowest ticket thing, right? Whatever the right fit is, I think is the right way to go there. So Mert, you mentioned there a little bit of a frustration point for you in terms of the the assumptions, but I'm curious also from your perspective, like what are some of the most frustrating things you find within this buying journey and process, and how would you like them to be fixed, maybe is the question.
Kevin, when I think my biggest it's not a frustration, it's just an observation. When the integrator or the OEM of the technology only looks at the process that they can fix or that they can improve, and anything upstream, anything downstream, they just put a box around their proposal and then they just say outside of scope, right? How you bring the product to me, not my problem. I will pick the product for you, and then afterwards, how you pack the product, ship the product, sort the product, not my problem. Yeah, exactly, Christoph. That little bit of that compartmentalization, right, or the silos. I think that's where I lose my operations the most, right? When the solution is not well thought out end to end, from dock to dock, right? Unless I can articulate, hey, here's how the product flow is coming into the system. Here's how we're going to handle it within the system. Here's how it gets out of the system. And the integrator is aware of my in and out, upstream and downstream requirements. Then they also shape their solution to fit that. And the proposals they provide are holistic like that. There's a better conversion rate on my end too, because I think, Christoph, Rainer, one thing from a buyer perspective, as the buyer, I also have stakeholders that I need to justify this purchase against. I'm not the buyer. I don't cut the check, right? I don't. I do. Well, I guess I do cut the check, but before I can get the approvals to cut the check, I need to have a very in-depth operational review conversation. Unless my operational leader signs off on the holisticness of the solution, unless my WMS team signs off on the systematic flow of the solution, and unless my finance partner signs off on the feasibility of the solution, this thing doesn't go. So I guess, Kevin, to answer the question briefly, I'm looking for holistic proposals. A vendor who becomes that marriage, like Rainer mentioned, cares about the holisticness of the solution, and they cover all aspects of it. It makes my job easier as an engineer to justify it to my business. The conversion is much quicker. And again, everybody's happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that holistic approach that you're describing there is so important, right? Because at the end of the day, the operation itself is a flow, right? And if there's a stop in the flow, then that creates an issue. I mean, I've heard stories where, very simply, like, people implement pick assist AMRs, and they end up with like a problem getting enough totes at the beginning point, right? It's like, okay, well, we just sped this up and all the totes are at the end, and how do we get them back to like the induction point, right? So, the little things like that, or even bigger things like you're talking about here, Mert, too, I mean, become so important to kind of bring that together to see like what is the whole scope, right? And how do we make sure that, like, all right, well, we're not solving one problem and then creating another one, essentially, in that sense. So Christoph, from your perspective, right? I think obviously you saw some frustrating points in the buying journey, which led you to start iAutomate. So tell us a little bit about kind of what are those frustration points that you saw, and how that led you to kind of what you're doing today.
Yeah, a fantastic question. Over the many years, to me, it was always important, especially when I was in a sales role selling a solution for a solution provider, a product. It was not just the transaction getting done and, you get your commission check, everyone's happy. No, I really deeply cared about the customer outcome, and it was very painful when that outcome didn't go well. So that really taught me to think about everything Mert just mentioned. It's really, I need an end-to-end perspective here. I need a holistic approach. Yes, you might only be providing a subsystem of the whole thing, but I need you to think beyond that. And I think putting the customer back into the room, or having this whole conversation being a bit more customer centric, is what needs to change. And it's ironic, because if you go to any trade show, you're hearing everyone's customer obsessed, customer this, customer that. Well, in truth, what if we would ask ourselves, what would change in a world where the customer outcome matters more than the transaction itself? And this brochure selling approach, right? I have a shuttle, what's your problem? I mean, it's a running joke, but it's true. I mean, many conversations kind of start that way. I think putting the customer back into the room and enabling them themselves, there's an absolute solution overload, which is fantastic. I mean, solutions to robotics are being standardized. There's more and more new solutions. There's new tech coming out of all four corners of the earth. I mean, I was in China last year, and I was blown away with what I saw and what's coming our way as well. So there's no shortage of solutions. And to navigate that forest, I think there's room for improvement in the buyer journey, and that's where we want to help as well. And also, again, to put the customer more in the center, where the customer can qualify the business case to the point where they really need to start having these meaningful engagements with the solution provider. So the end of the day, yeah, that brochure selling, I think there's a trend that's really ending, and it's coming down more to who really understands the end-to-end design I need, and then the long-term outcome. Because what we forget is, while the transaction is a one-time thing, you sell the system, that customer is investing 20 years into the infrastructure of their supply chain.
Yeah.
So there's a lot at stake. As Mert mentioned, they're not just buying it, they have to report to people and stakeholders and shareholders alike. So I think understanding the responsibility and the longevity of these investments and the significance in the supply chain. We've just seen some examples, Kroger pulling out with Ocado and major write-offs, millions of dollars, because strategies were not developed properly. I mean, these things leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth, and they don't serve the industry. So to just improve the overall quality is something we want to do, and give the customers more tools to do it yourself. I say that carefully, only to a certain degree. All this engineering has to take place, but the initial qualification, I think, can be improved through such tools, and that creates a win-win. I mean, if the diligence goes into the process, the probability for a bad outcome is low. And at this point, I get to use my favorite sentence: without data, you're just another person with an opinion. So data is really the basis for all of this. And my take on it, and why we're passionate to helping the customer in the beginning of their buying journey.
All right, fantastic, and I think that's great, and it's a great mission to be on, and I think it's very interesting because we are, like you said, there's an abundance of solutions now, right? And we are, I feel like, getting to the point in the last year or so where there are so many solutions, and there's been enough deployments of these kind of newer types of automations and solutions where you're starting to hear some of the bad stories, right, where it didn't quite pan out. And to your point, Christoph, like the customer is investing in this, large project for their infrastructure for multiple years on end, right? And maybe to the solution provider, they get the check and all right, they move on to the next one, right? But the person that buys that, the customer, like they have to live with that for a long time, and in a lot of situations too. And I'm curious, Mert's opinion on this, because I feel like a lot of times too, some of these large systems and decisions to put in these systems could be a make or break situation for someone's job, right? I mean, is that correct thinking, Mert?
What Christoph just said resonated heavily with me. One sentence that I always say when I visit a facility is, "Who on earth designed this place before me?" Right? You go to a brownfield facility, you look at the way it was set up, whether with automation, whether with conveyance manual, whatever it may be, and you judge the work of a prior engineer, right, a peer of yours. So when you're committing to a bolted infrastructure like that for 10 years, 20 years, right? The fair market value or the depreciation of these assets are quite long. You really need to know how you're designing this and future-proofing it so that 10, 15 years from then, a new, younger engineer, a better looking one too, hopefully, comes into that facility and says, "Who on earth designed this facility?" At least you can say, "Here are the reasons why we designed it the way we did, 5 years, 10 years ago." I think that's very important to us, right? I think, Christoph, you mentioned it too, right? We heard on the news some of the closures, some of the misses with the solution design in a market that's so drastically changing, right? We had an understanding of retail and supply chain prior to COVID. We had a different understanding of retail and supply chain during the pandemic. Post-pandemic, it's also different. So now, if you look at a 15-year slice of a timeline, you have a 5-year slice that's different, another 5-year slice that's on fire, and then a later 5-year slice where things are getting a little softer with tariffs, with what's happening in the world. So as solution designers, the best thing you can do, or as engineers, the best thing you can do is find the right partner, find the right technology that can stick with you and adjust to these difficult times, adjust to profile changes, adjust to everything. So yeah, I agree. I fully agree, Christoph.
Yeah.
Supply chain resilience. I like to refer to what you're saying is can that solution withstand not just the objectives of today and some of the threats that you are able to anticipate, but especially the unforeseen changes, and how resilient is that solution really? And some are more and others are not. And I think that's really the tricky part of it all.
Yeah. Hey, Kevin, going a little off topic here. I hate how much I'm agreeing with Christoph because he supports Red Bull in Formula One, and I support Ferrari. but yeah, he has some good points. I can't lie.
Outside of Formula One, he has some good points. Maybe yes. All right, fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure to talk about this today, and incredibly insightful to get perspectives from across multiple sides of the spectrum here. And as we close out this conversation, I want to kind of go around and get kind of maybe one takeaway from you each, and one, I guess, piece of advice in a sense when people are entering into this kind of automation journey, because I think we are seeing, this point where the market is getting larger for people that are looking at automation, because the solutions are becoming a little more accessible, whether it's from the application or just the price point in general. So I think there's a lot of people out there, especially as we're, putting this out prior to Modex and Logimat, that are, going to go to these shows like looking for probably their first foray into automation. So Rainer, you got the most experience here. So I'm going to go to you first and ask you what's your top piece of advice for people that are going to start on an automation journey?
Well, we had that. You start with the data, but I think I can sum it up in a pretty pragmatic sentence. Integrated automation is a journey. The project does not stop when you've delivered it. So be careful who you select as your partner. I think that's the advice I can give after so many years.
Yes. Well, that's true for marriage too, as we referenced before, right?
Some parallels there.
Who your partner is, right? And okay, great advice there. And Mert, what would be your advice for somebody that's going to be looking at automation just like you look at?
Invest in your engineering and solution design teams and people who can take very complex processes and explain it in a very simplistic step-by-step manner with the data backing, aka solution designers, right, are invaluable assets. It will make sure your organization is much better structured. The conversations that you're having with any vendor will be much more intelligent. And just having these well-rounded individuals in your teams is going to benefit a retailer, a pharmaceutical, whoever. So invest in your solution designers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's great advice to be able to translate it into simple terms, right? And because if you think about like, okay, well, on one hand, I'll talk to an engineer and, they may know the technicality a little bit more, but on another hand, maybe I'm talking to like a director of ops, right? And they want to know like from the ops perspective, well, give this to me in simple terms, right? So I can understand. So I think that's great advice there too. And Christoph, we'll close it out on you. So give us, besides use iAutomate as a tool to help you, what would be your top piece of advice?
Yes, definitely use iAutomate as a tool. Do your homework, prepare yourself, educate yourself, come prepared. That certainly can't hurt you. No, I think to sum up both points there, it's a journey. Also understand it begins way before selecting technology and vendors. It's a whole change management process. Understand that you are fundamentally changing the way your supply chain operation works. I would strongly advise against going with a technology first mentality into this, saying, I saw that technology and I need that no matter what. That probably won't work out well. If it does, you might have been lucky. But the real key thing I would probably give anyone on this journey is, yes, pick the right partner, but no matter what technology and partner you pick, have multiple contingency plans. Something will go wrong. Not everything will go to plan, but if you're prepared for that, then you'll be able to soften the blow and smooth it out and work it out. So I think those things are critical as well.
Got it. All right. Fantastic advice from all of you for sure. And definitely appreciate you all coming on the podcast and having this discussion today. I think very insightful and very informative for people that have already gone down the automation path or people that are just going to start going down that path as well. So Christoph, if people do want to use Automate for their journey, what's the best way to tap into that and leverage that as a resource?
Yes, you'll find our tools on iAutomate.app, application, iAutomate.app. You can use our configurator. It's open to the public. It doesn't. We don't charge people for it. We want to educate, so that's the best way to find it. Or reach out to us directly. And if you are a bit further ahead in your journey, we're happy to facilitate meetings with consultants or specialists, people who can guide those conversations too. But yeah, iAutomate.app probably the best place to start the journey.
All right, fantastic. And we'll put all the information about that at thenewwarehouse.com, as well as how to connect with this great panelist here today as well. And in the show notes too for easy access. So make sure you check that out and definitely leverage that on your journey through automation. So Christoph, Rainer, Mert, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.